with Abe's story.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us why you wanted to showcase Abe's story here as a short film here at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival.
Oh, Santa Barbara is world famous. I mean, like the quality of people that show their films here is amazing. There were 11 shorts in the program, and all of them were just mind blowing. I was so lucky to be part of it.
So tell us where the original idea came from for your short story. What inspired you to do Abe's story?
Well, I found out later in life that I was related to Bram Stoker through my mother's side. So I started researching for a documentary. I was going to do a documentary on Bram Stoker. And when I kind of did all the research and the pitch, it kind of was going to be more like a PhD than an actual interesting film. So I was with a company called Snackbox, and Gary Walsh, who's the co-writer on the film, he kind of had the suggestion that we could do it as a short film. Mm-hmm. So it was based on bringing awareness to Dracula, and Bram Stoker writing Dracula is kind of what the genesis for Abe's story was.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Bram Stoker wrote the novel in essence as a response to syphilis and sex at the time.
Yeah, and there's loads of theories. So there's that's one theory. There's another theory is that he was sickly as a child, so he was sick until he was 12, and his mother used to tell him stories about the plague in Sligo. There's also a character up in the north of Ireland that was meant to be a genesis for Dracula. But the main take I'm having on Dracula is he got the original idea from somebody who visited the Lyceum Theatre. There's a story called Dracula's Guest that was meant to be a prologue to the book. And he wrote this story over 7 years, and he added in little bits of his life along the way. So, I mean, if you've read Dracula, which many people have, there's quite a few trains of thought in it. It's not a very linear book. Mm-hmm. And that's my take on it, is that's all the things that he gathered in from his various travels.
So it was true that he did write some kind of play in regards to this.
Yes, so back in the 1890s you couldn't copyright written material, but you could copyright a play. So the Lyceum Theatre, the meat and potatoes, the Lyceum Theatre was kind of horrific versions on the classics. So the versions on Hamlet, and they would add in lots of whiz and bang to it. So he did want to do a play version of Dracula, but the one that was performed at the Lyceum was for copyright, and it was 4 hours long, and it was pretty grueling. It was never written specifically. It was written as a novel that he hoped one day to turn into a play.
Wow. That is very interesting. Well, let's talk about the film itself.
Okay.
The animation is very unique because you have 3D backgrounds with 2D characters. Talk about that.
Well, I was inspired by shadow puppets. So there's in the Victorian era, there's the shadow puppet theatre. There's also a history of Malaysian shadow puppets. And I was always been a fan of Tim Burton, always been a fan of that kind of quirky kind of style. So I gave myself the challenge that what if the characters were shadow puppets and in profile, and then the backgrounds could become something much more interesting. And my background is in 3D animation. So actually the backgrounds, I modeled all the backgrounds, and it's a technique called box modeling, where you literally just start with a box and then start extruding out sides. And with that I could really enjoy the world of Victorian London.
Was that a difficult process because the background seemed to move a lot?
Yes. I was working in visual effects on the TV show Penny Dreadful. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah.
So we would get the scripts from John Logan, and they were all very florid. It was like, people in Victorian England didn't speak, especially in the theatre, they didn't speak in very succinct sentences. So when I co-wrote the script with Gary Walsh, the people who funded the film were Screen Ireland. So, we got a grant, and they wanted a much shorter version of the film. And we'd locked into shadow puppets and almost being sitting in the proscenium. So you only see characters the full length of the character, and you don't cut into the scenes. So a way that you can kind of get away or keep people's interest is if you make the sets complicated and you make things happen and you use backdrops and props coming in and stuff going up. So in some ways, it was always designed that way, but the final film had a lot more going on. So you're kind of, not distracting is probably the wrong term, but if somebody's making, you know, soliloquy, if things are happening, it doesn't seem to take as long. So it's a little bit of a product of the storytelling.
So when you impose the silhouette, the dark silhouettes, the 2D dark silhouettes, was that the easiest part of it?
Silhouettes. I loved the idea of silhouettes, but then what became very difficult, if something's black, you have to have a very light background. So that was a challenge that I didn't realize at the time, because as soon as you make anything dark and you put in dramatic lighting, it's, you know, Dracula's a horror story, so it should take place at night. So I would make these wonderful sets, and I'd put in, you know, kind of spotlighting, so candles and things, but then the character would come on and they'd completely disappear. So the backgrounds are really, really bright, and it was that challenge, and that's also where the colouring comes in a little bit. It was that challenge to have something have form, but have very light backgrounds, so you kind of add in keys and then you add in fill lights to compensate for that a little bit.
So do you want to expand this technique into more short films or a feature-length film someday?
I would like to do a feature-length film on the actual subject matter, but I think a feature film with this technique where you really can't cut, like you can't cut in, would be very, very difficult. So I think this technique would be good for shorts. So I worked on another show, Vampirina, a Disney Junior show. So though, you know, preschool is kind of about 10, 12 minutes, I think it would be ideal for that, the adventures of Abe and his friends. And the actual story of Bram Stoker and the Lyceum, I think, would make a good feature film. So that script is also in the works.
Excellent. And just to wrap it up, I'm going to circle back to your relationship with Bram Stoker. Talk about what specific was the relationship, and when you first discovered it. I mean, what was your reaction?
So my mother, when I was growing up, she always kind of mentioned that we were somehow related to Bram Stoker, and, you know, I don't know if you know Irish mothers, but you tend to kind of go, yeah, okay. And I had come to the States, I'd studied in production design at AFI, and I'd moved back to Ireland, and somebody from the family had looked her up, saw she was a relation, and she was commissioned to do a bust, because she's an artist, she's a sculpture artist, of Bram Stoker. So it was a loose connection, but it was never defined. And then one day, it was like a very gothic day, it was windy, it was raining, I went to a pub with a family historian, and he laid out this diagram of how I actually was genuinely related to Bram Stoker, and it kind of, he had 7 brothers, and it comes up through the family tree, and I'm related to one of his brothers. And, you know, he only had 1 child, so there's very few actual direct blood relations of Bram Stoker, but I'm definitely related within the family. But the more interesting part is my maternal grandmother died when my mother was only 8, and a Stoker who was a closer relation to Bram Stoker moved into the house and raised my mother.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so my mother, with her actual birth mother, never went to the theatre, they never dealt with anything that would have been, you know, tarot cards or paranormal or any of that kind of world. But I grew up in a house where I'd been to the theatre, and there was tarot cards and all these kind of things like crystals and things, and that was all the Stoker influence. So it was almost like there was a kind of longer shadow of Bram Stoker kind of always over my life. So when I kind of discovered that for certain, I was like, I have to do something. I have to do something on this. Yeah.
I think that's excellent. Well, hey, congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
And I think you should continue his legacy.
Oh, great.
Through all of this.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.